thanks everyone for coming. This is the second office hours for general questions, and it's kind of a fun thing for me, and I think for the rest of the team. We get a chance to interact with you guys and get to kind of hear some of your questions and answer them in a public forum where everyone can benefit from the answers. So you guys tend to send us a lot of really great questions, but we answer them one-on-one, and because of that, the community at large doesn't get to benefit from that kind of shared knowledge. So that's what office hours is all about, is giving you guys a forum to ask questions and for us to kind of openly discuss them. I'm going to kick it off with a quick poll here. Let's see. We have a few to choose from. Actually, doesn't look like the one I want to ask is here. So I'm just going to ask it. Start a question. Which certification is the hardest? Okay, let's say we do have a couple questions coming in. First, I'm going to introduce the team. We have 4 of us from the content team. We have some cloud technology instructors here with us. We have Andrew, Stuart, Eric, and myself, Ben. And we're kind of a group of solutions architects, developers, security professionals with a lot of years of experience using different cloud services and platforms. So we've used things like Amazon, Google Cloud, Azure, Heroku, and a lot of different programming languages and tech stacks. And so you guys can throw some really fun and hard questions our way, hopefully, and we'll see what we can come up with. Andrew, Stuart, Eric, are you all there?
Yeah, this is Eric.
Yes, I'm here. Hi, Andrew here, Ben.
Perfect.
Hi, Ben and Stuart.
It's good to talk to you guys. We have these guys on the team here are from all over the world. So for Andrew, what is it, 5 a.m. right now?
It's almost 5:30 a.m. now. So.
Oh, okay. Okay, so it's still early. Stuart, what time is it there?
It's 7 p.m. here.
Okay, so Eric, what do you got?
Yeah, it's 3 p.m. A lovely sunny day in Brazil in the winter, but right now it's 27 degrees Celsius. I love this winter, yeah.
That's fantastic. Okay, so this is the team. We have a lot of different experience, like I said, so let's kick it off with some questions from you guys. You guys can ask questions with the GoToWebinar interface. There will be a little panel there for you to ask your questions. We're going to kind of filter through them and kind of just look through for any duplicates, kind of coalesce them into one question, and I'm just going to kind of read them off and let the team here answer them. So let's start off with, let's see, we have a starter question of which certification is the hardest for us, for our opinion, across the different platforms. Who wants to field that one? That's an interesting one.
Yeah.
I'll be happy to talk about the AWS certifications. I would say out of the 3 associates, because there's 5 certifications across AWS. You've got 3 associate exams and 2 professional. You have a solutions architect, systems operations, and a DevOps. They're your 3 associates. And then you have a solutions architect professional and a development professional as well. Looking at the 3 associate certifications first, I would say the hardest out of those would be the system operations cert. That's because it kind of asks for a deeper knowledge and understanding of how all the kind of services operate at a deeper level, at an operations level. So for kind of troubleshooting those more difficult situations. So it does require a deeper knowledge of across the services, whereas your solutions architect is great to get an understanding across the board of the different services, such as your VPC, IAM, your EC2, and your databases. So for your solutions architect, you're really looking across the whole kind of platform, quite high level. You do need to know the differences between each of them and how they interlink. But for the systems operations, there's that much deeper knowledge required how they work with each other to kind of troubleshoot deeper issues. And then the developer side, that kind of overlaps between the two. So the developer associate, that overlaps between your architect and your system operations. But I would say that's probably the easiest of the three. Personally, myself, I started off with the solutions architect just because I wanted to get a broad overview of all the different services and how they kind of link together before attempted the system operations. And then the developer, like I say, once you've done those first two, although the developer's easiest, I think once you've done those first two, system operations and solutions architect, I think you'll find it quite easy, or easier, I should say, to attain the developer.
Nice.
That's my personal opinion, anyway.
Yeah. Eric, you have some experience with this. You agree?
Yeah, I agree with you on the AWS side. And a few months ago, I was taking a look at the Azure curriculum for certifications. And I think that it's not that hard to pass the exam. But as other Microsoft exams, it's a lot to memorize. They like to ask you questions about commands that you might use for some specific actions, which is a bit boring sometimes. So I can't tell much about Azure. I think that their exams are a bit easier if we are talking about technical knowledge, but the exam itself might be harder to pass because you literally have to memorize more things. And I don't have any clue about Google. You might have some then.
Yeah, I can speak to Google Cloud Platform, which is something I've been playing around with quite a bit in the past month. So it kind of follows what you and Stuart were saying about AWS. The developer one is going to be the easiest. Big data is going to be second, and mostly it's just because there's a lot of stuff to memorize, like you said with the Azure stuff. You have to know a lot about big data and data processing in addition to the suite of tools that Google Cloud offers. So there's a lot there. But the most difficult is going to be the SysOps, which wants you to understand the platform holistically, as well as kind of knowing how to develop for it and architect really fault-tolerant and highly available applications. So that's my take on Google Cloud. We have another question, which is, I have one bucket, and I'm assuming this is regarding S3. I have one bucket, and only one user can write on that bucket, and the others can't read or download. I think this is asking about S3 permissions. Who's feeling into S3 right now?
Yeah, I can take a bash at that, or if someone else wants to take it.
No, go Stuart.
Yeah, go ahead, Stuart, please.
Okay. So if I'm interpreting the question right, are you asking how to set up permissions so only one user can write and other users can't read or download? If that's the case, then there's a couple of ways of doing that. You can use IAM, Identity and Access Management, to set up a policy for that particular user to have access to that bucket. Or you can set up a bucket policy, so a policy applied to the actual bucket within S3. And within that policy, you can set up different people to have different permissions. So there's a couple of ways to do that. You can restrict it at the bucket level or at the user and group level using IAM permissions.
Just one thing to add in this answer is there are some general AWS permissions such as I guess power user and administrator access. Also, if you're giving full permissions to S3, those permissions will have those managed policies will have permissions to all buckets within your account. So in this case, you must, if you really want to only one person within your account have access to that bucket, you need to grant the access, that's the easy part, but you also need to make sure that you deny the access for all the other people within your account to that particular bucket, and that might be a bit tricky because sometimes more than one people can manage policies, so you might end up denying things and someone else will go and grant permission to that bucket. So
nice. Let's see. So we have another question. I'm a Java developer, and I want to enhance my skills using AWS. And they're asking what certification should they start on, and how long will it take? So my guess is we're going to be talking about the AWS Developer Certification. Andrew, what are your thoughts on that? How long for the AWS Developer Cert?
Yeah, well, if you're starting with no prior knowledge of AWS, it's well worth, excuse me, getting a bit of experience with the actual fundamentals or foundations of the services, because the developer exam is not out to test your knowledge of all of the detail of AWS products. It's out to sort of show that you have some knowledge of how to use them together. So having a good understanding of just those foundations is a good place to start. You could invest a week or two in just running through some of the foundations courses that we have, compute and storage, and getting a high-level view of some of the services that AWS provides. And then just delving into use cases for how you might stand up or develop apps in AWS and around AWS. And a lot of that's coming back to how we use elasticity, how we loosely couple applications and use as much or remove as much session state as we can. And so a lot of those topics are covered in our developer track for AWS. If you look on the Cloud Academy website, we actually have a new track going live in a matter of days. So what I'd recommend is that you wait a couple of days if you can and complete our developer certification for AWS learning path.
Excellent, thank you. Let's see, we have another one that, let's skim through. Sorry, we're just kind of coalescing these questions. This one says, I'm a network engineer. I want to learn more about the cloud. It will be hard to learn. Will it be hard to learn after some projects? Let's see. They want to know if it's going to be difficult to learn kind of AWS or cloud concepts if they're not a developer or systems engineer. And then where would they start? And so they've heard some recommendations that maybe Python, Chef, AWS, and OpenStack is the place to start kind of becoming a cloud engineer if you're already a network engineer. Anyone have some thoughts on kind of where to start your career if you're already a network engineer who has some technical expertise?
I would say any respectful cloud platform out there will have some networking of any kind. In the case of AWS, we have VPC. And it's great that you have network knowledge, because training people, we see a lot of doubts in regards to networking, and I can tell about the other providers, but for AWS, this is a tricky part, especially if you want to get certified. Most of the troubleshooting questions are related to networking, so networking is a big topic. And the great thing is you already know what a subnet is, you already know how to calculate the subnet mask and so on. And that will still apply in the cloud. You will still be able to create a virtual network, and you still be able to create virtual subnets using the same concepts that you are already familiar in your network day-to-day business. And you see things such as routers and so on. So that part is covered. Great for you. The rest is not so complicated to learn if you're not a developer or a sys engineer. But for sure it will be harder for you because you have to keep up with some concepts. So you have an advantage in the networking side because you already have the background for that area, but you have a lack of knowledge on the developer side and the sysengineering side. But that's really not an issue if you just want to go forward and learn those concepts and apply them in a cloud provider, in a cloud environment.
Yeah, I like that. I agree. I think that I don't think there are enough really network engineers out there, and so if you already have that skill set, which is one of the areas I think people struggle in the cloud, is they don't quite understand the networking components, like you said. I think that's going to give them kind of a leg up when it comes to learning those components that other people are finding more difficult. As for I'm going to try and speak. They specifically mentioned Python, Chef, AWS. If you're into learning a programming language, I do like Python as a kind of first language. It has a really nice syntax for readability, very few lines of code to clutter up things, and you don't have a lot of the stuff about the syntax of a language that kind of can trip people up. So if you're picking a language, I like Python. I don't know about the rest of these guys, but let's see what else we have. We have another one here that I don't have experience with, but I'm going to ask it and see if anyone else on the team does. This question says, is EFS better than native Linux file system? Last week, this person did a test for performance of EFS, and they felt the result was poor transfer speeds when doing rsync of something about 300 gigabytes. So Eric, you have experience with EFS, right?
Yeah, I haven't used it, but I talked with a lot of AWS guys working in this project, and it's true that they are having a lot of issues with EFS, and I don't know if they already released the service or is it still in preview? Do you know about that, Andrew?
Yeah, no, it's general availability. So you can be assured that when AWS goes live with a product, it's fully ready and bulletproof. I think it's a new product and a new service, so yes, there will be a few differences in how you go about things, just as there were when we first started using virtualized computers. So often the use cases that we're accustomed to may feel slightly different when we do it in this different way. And the best recommendation I have is to spend as much time as you can in the console just getting to learn a bit about EFS. As a fully managed service that's going to give you a little bit more resilience and durability than you might have over other virtualized services, it is going to be different from running your file system in your data center. Yeah, so there's going to be nuances that at first might seem to be deal breakers, like it may seem slower, or you may not have all of the file I/O actions that you're used to supported. But you can be assured that over time, a lot of those features will be added, just as they did with EC2 and S3 and all the other services that AWS now leads in. So I think it's really hot off the press, and I personally haven't heard a lot about use cases giving people problems. There will be some grey area, of course, questions like, where is information stored? Is it spread all over the network? It's going to be within a region across multiple availability zones, as we see with Elastic Block Store. Well, the difference between S3 and Elastic Block Store is that for EBS volumes, they're stored or replicated amongst an availability zone, whereas with S3, data is spread across availability zones within a region. So with EFS, there's going to be some nuances along those lines of where information is stored, which may be quite off-putting to you when you first read it on the product page or hear about it from a webinar or perhaps from a trade show. So I think delve into the product as best you can. One other good thing about AWS is the great support. So the information that's generally published is going to be quite detailed. I'm having a look through EFS myself at the moment. I spend most of my day trying to keep up with all of the new product releases, as we all do. I think it's an exciting addition to the storage family, and let's leave that one open. We'll come back to you with some thoughts on the specific question you have around EFS. Let me have a look.
Yeah, I'm here at the AWS console, and the service was already released. Nice, and I need to really try this service because I was very curious about it. And back to the question, if your issue is performance, I haven't personally tested that, and so I can't tell with experience. But my guess would be, if you need performance, don't move to EFS right now. But if you just need an easy solution to create some big disks in the cloud, especially using AWS, go to EFS, because for sure they will improve the service over time. And when we talk about things like ECS, which is the Elastic Container Service, when you are running Docker, and we know that storage is a complicated matter in the Docker side, I feel so excited about EFS because imagine that we can have tons and tons and tons of Docker containers storing their data into EFS, and we'll have the data already managed for us. That will be so easy. I don't know if that's possible right now, but I can foresee the applications of this service. So if you're looking for performance right now, rsync is out there since really nobody knows. It's really old. It's a very mature tool. So if you're looking for performance, don't move to EFS right now. But if you just need some managed service, if you are looking for an easy way to store large amounts of data and you need to use this data inside instances or containers as disks, and so move to EFS.
That's great. I was going to add to it, but then you guys kind of answered with everything that I wanted to say, so I have nothing to add. So I'm going to move on to another question, which I think is going to be a really good one. We have somebody who is a system administrator currently, and they want to know which approach they should take to get AWS certified. Should they start with the solutions architect or the SysOps associate?
Okay.
So we have you guys are certified in both. What do you guys think as a system administrator? Which one is a good starting point?
I always like to say, you can correct me if you don't agree. I always like to recommend people to start with the solutions architect certification, because then to get certified in the other certifications will be much easier, because the solutions architect covers as a broad overview of all services, and it will cover very well how to really architect and solution using the best practices and cost-effective solutions. So that's really a great starting point. And the SysOps exam is by far the toughest exam of all the associate ones. And I'll say no, it's the toughest exam I ever took. So it's a long journey to achieve the SysOps certification. You need to have a lot of hands-on practice, and might be frustrating to start with that particular certification, because sometimes it can, who haven't ever failed an exam? It sucks. It's a day that you finish the exam and you see the result in the screen and you fail, and everything else sucks. You just want to go to your house and buy a big bucket of ice cream, eat some chocolates, and so that might be frustrating, and you might end up not motivated enough to keep trying to achieve that certification. So I think that would be halfway taking the solutions architect, and then the other halfway taking the SysOps.
I totally agree with you, Eric. Like you say, it'll be great to have a good understanding of services across the board and how they kind of interact with each other before looking at the SysOps, because like we discussed earlier, that kind of digs deeper into each service and a deeper level than the solutions architect does. So to have that broader knowledge first, I think it certainly helps when trying to get the SysOps, especially when it comes to troubleshooting. So although their current role is more guided to the SysOps, as an approach to the certification, I would recommend doing the solutions architect first and then the systems operations. So I completely agree.
I would say even more, if you really want the SysOps, after the solutions architect, take the developer one, because that will also help you getting the SysOps certification. Because in the developer one, you be aware of things such as managing sessions when you're using auto-scaling behind an ELB, and will be also another small step to the SysOps certification.
There's definitely overlap between the certifications as well, because when I was preparing for my solutions architect, I looked at the sample questions across all 3 associate exams, because if you look on the AWS website, they give you a few sample questions for each exam. And in my actual solutions architect associate exam, I got a couple of questions from each area that were on those sample exams online. So it's well worth having a look at all 3, because there's definitely overlap between the 3. So yeah, definitely take a look.
That's great. We have another question. I'm gonna pose this one to you, Andrew. That's assuming, like I said, Andrew's. It's about 5:30ish there for Andrew. So Andrew's probably asleep right now, but I'm gonna see if I can't wake him up. The question is regarding employability of AWS certified individuals. This person wants to know if they pass their certification and they are able to kind of master Python for automation tasks, so presumably a lot of DevOps style tasks. What does the job market look like for that person?
Yeah, yeah, it's a question we get a lot, and I think it's challenging as an engineer to see all these different options out in the market and wonder, which one's best for me and where do I go next? And it feels like things are moving very, very quickly. Well, my personal take on this is that AWS is still the top of the tree in terms of certifications that employers are looking for. And actually, there was a recent Forbes survey that had the Amazon Web Services Certified Solution Architect Associate exam as the top certification in market, in that it was the one that brought in the highest salary. So if I remember off the top of my head, the average salary for a certified solutions architect associate was over $125,000 US dollars, which is pretty impressive. And there's a lot of partners and customers out there who are embracing AWS technologies. You only need to show up to any of the road shows or any of the events to see how much interest there is in market. And AWS has over 1 million customers as of 2015. So you can expect that that's just growing exponentially in all the new regions. They've just launched a new region in Mumbai. So there's just this huge pressure to find people that know how to do this stuff. You have customers who are literally wanting to get their hands on all of this elasticity and scalability, and they want to see and have this benefit themselves. And one of the first stepping stones to achieving that is actually having teams that can do this stuff. And the majority of people out in the market are more legacy, because we've spent the last 5 or 10 years learning how to do things in a more data-centric way or data center-centric way. So that type of cloud skill is in huge demand. And in my previous role, I was a partner manager for AWS. So I deal with partners daily, and almost daily I'd hear from them, can you find us more AWS certified people? We just need more people for our team. And for every customer that we'd interact with, there would be that same problem of either people not knowing enough right now to be able to leverage some of these great services, or that they just couldn't find people to go and employ. So my advice is start with the Solution Architect Associate certification if you can. If you are a developer, I think having that broad knowledge of how to bring services, AWS services together, and how to discuss and design hybrid solutions is going to be very valuable. It's going to get you in the door, basically, and then of course you can diversify into more specific areas that perhaps suit your product skills or service skills. The developer exam is not that popular in market, but it does show and give assurance to customers and to partners that you're able to do this stuff with best practice. And a lot of the rhetoric we have in market is around best practice, around security, around doing things in the most operationally efficient way. So, of course, having that certification says to your employer that you're actually able to do this stuff in the right way. And that can make a huge difference because, as you're already finding, I expect, there's so many services. You know, there was over 500 new service releases in 2015. So there's a lot of new things coming out, and of course, it's also quite distracting to have so many new things popping up. And if you have someone who's got the base certification and how to do things the best way, they're more likely to bring value to the business. And I think employers recognize that. So it's a great place to start. You're in the right place. You know, there literally is a huge mass migration towards AWS and cloud services in the market. And, you know, as I said, you only need to go to any of the AWS roadshows or seminars to just see that interest. You know, they all sell out. reInvent is the global sort of get-together. It's in Las Vegas in November, and seats for that literally sell out. You know, about now, and you know, it's incredible how popular the services are. So yeah, you're in the right place. The SysOps exam, as the guys have already covered, it is definitely harder. It's a harder bar to reach, and you need to have a lot more detail knowledge. And whereas the developer, certified developer, and solutions architect associate are aimed to show that you have the ability to bring AWS services together to create the right outcome for an end customer, the SysOps exam is more about your detailed knowledge of the AWS platform. And it can be quite confronting when you see the level of detail that's expected for that SysOps exam. So to keep your confidence high, I think if you're feeling, if you're a developer already, start with the certified developer. That's a good exam to go and sit, and then do the solution architect associate, and then move on to the solution architect, sorry, the SysOps associate.
Excellent. I want to just adjust that question slightly. So it's about employability as well, but what about somebody that has no experience? Maybe they're starting in a different industry. What's the likelihood of them getting a certification and then moving right into an actual job in the industry?
Yeah,
I'm going to pose that to you, Andrew, first, and then open it up to Stuart and Eric.
Yeah, it's interesting because, you know, I suppose 99 or 90% of the conversations we have with engineers and solution architects are people who already, you know, have a prior knowledge of IT. And then there's a lot of people we talk to through Cloud Academy who are looking at moving into IT and have made the right choice to go into cloud technologies because that's the most popular area in the market right now. So that track is, you know, you're in the right place for that. You don't have to be an expert. You don't have to have 20 years experience in IT to become a cloud solutions architect. To be someone who's good at it, of course, you need to have as much experience as possible, and there are obviously going to be people that are going to be better than others because they've had more experience. But I think if you had to plan it out, like if I was to wake up tomorrow and say, look, I've got no experience at all and I'd like to be a solution architect working in the IT industry by the end of the year, how do I do it? Well, I would start with the foundation courses in the Cloud Academy catalog. Then there's some really good getting started content in there, just fundamentals of what cloud technology is. And those are good because they take you through a really sort of step-by-step approach to it. They don't assume that you know everything already. I'd also do a couple of the AWS accreditations, because those give you quite a good base knowledge of the product as well. So over the first 3 months, you could get yourself a good hands-on understanding of what cloud computing is. And you can arrive with no knowledge, and after 3 months, I think, have a good understanding of how those things work. Now we want to get into more of a how do I do things rather than what they are. And from sort of the 3 to 6 month window, you'd be looking at doing things in the console and getting more technical understanding of how to work with some of the components like storage. How do I store things in the cloud? How do I run computer services in the cloud? And that also is available in those Cloud Academy courses that are more aimed towards the services. So when we talk about storage fundamentals for AWS, there's Azure storage fundamentals as well, and there's also Google storage fundamentals. So early on, you could either decide to be a generalist and understand or have a good, let's say, a working understanding of all three platforms, so that you could comfortably sit in a room and discuss what the options are for each and help an end customer make an informed decision about which technology will best suit their use case. And to do that type of advice or advisory, you're not expected to be a hands-on expert. And I think there's a really, really big opportunity in market to be in that advisory space, because customers generally come to the product wanting to see all of the value straight away, and of course they can't get that from their own teams because their teams are still busy doing day-to-day jobs, and they're looking to hire people that can help with those first discussions. And when you think through a cloud project, there's a lot of people that are involved. There's a lot of stakeholders every time we talk about changing. So there's business stakeholders that might be looking after the current, financial planning for how systems are run. There's the marketing team who want to know that we can reach out and do things quickly and efficiently, and reach more customers and retain them with more detailed services. And then we've got also those business teams that generally just want to get something done. And a lot of the case studies you'll see from AWS describe that journey very effectively. Businesses like Coca-Cola, like Suncorp, who have actually taken their whole business and transformed it in a way that really uses AWS services to best effect. So that advisory space, after 3 to 6 months, you're becoming more hands-on with how to do things. So you could have an adequate discussion. It may be over lunch or over a drink, but you're able to say, yeah, this is how you'd run storage services, this is how you'd run compute. And then perhaps from your 6 to 9 months, you'd be looking at getting into more detail about the actual services themselves and how to use them. And that's where you'd start to look to the certified developer, the certified solutions architect associate certifications, because let's say at the end of the year you aim to sit that exam, then you're bulletproof and ready to get out there and start advising customers on how to do this type of technology. I hope that helps.
Yeah, I think that's really good. So your advice is kind of set a timeline, learn what they can to be a kind of advisor in that first year, and then kind of move in towards something maybe more permanent after that. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah, I think that's the easiest step if you have no prior IT knowledge.
Yes.
And let's face it, it's not going to happen overnight, but it can happen quickly. And having a good ground level understanding of what the benefits of the various platforms are, what the concerns and considerations might be for anyone who's looking at moving to the cloud, those are things that I've called advisory, but they sit above the sort of SysOps team, if you like. They're the project managers, the business analysts, they're business managers, they're marketing people, just people who want to know a little bit more about how to use this technology. But in the back of your mind, you'll always know you're going to have a team who actually does the actual detail. So I think there's a big opportunity in market for that, because that's the kind of gap right now. And then, you also have the option to diversify into 1 or 2 services as your interest gets piqued. You might find that you're really interested in storage. You might find networking or security as an area that, you're finding more and more interesting as you go through those first 6 months. And and yeah, it's TBC basically. There's a lot of good opportunity out there.
Nice. I like that. It's a really thorough answer. Thank you. This is a good question. I think Eric and Stuart are gonna fight over who gets to answer this one because they're both very well qualified for this. But I'm gonna ask it and let's see who gets it first. Ready? How can I apply full bucket encryption for S3? Go.
Okay, well, there's a couple of ways you can apply encryption in S3. Typically, server-side encryption, SSE, or client-side encryption. If you use server-side encryption, then AWS will manage the whole encryption process for you. It uses keys that it encrypts, and it uses some really strong block ciphers, 256-bit advanced encryption standard, also known as AES 256. But with the server-side encryption, there's 3 different options you can use. Each one kind of gives a different level of manageability of who has the key and who kind of encrypts it at what point. There's a lot more information on that online. I won't kind of go into each one in a lot of detail now. But you have your server-side encryption, where essentially AWS will manage a lot of the encryption and look after the keys for you. And then you have your client-side encryption, where typically you would encrypt your data first before uploading to S3. And so to kind of encrypt your bucket, you would use either one of those depending on which route and how much kind of control you wanted over your encryption keys. For ease, I would go with server-side encryption, and that's one I'd kind of typically use, but obviously it depends on what you're trying to encrypt and why and how sensitive this data is. What would you say, Eric?
I just only have one thing to add, and just to complete the question. He says that how I can apply full bucket encryption. So I believe that he wants to have all the objects inside a bucket encrypted, and you're right, we can use server-side or client-side encryption, but to really enforce that every single object inside a bucket will be encrypted, you need to create a bucket policy. And in this policy, you will deny every single put object action in the bucket that there isn't the header of the encryption. So with this policy, you can guarantee that every single object inside the bucket will be encrypted. Otherwise, you can have multiple objects encrypted, but a single one that won't be encrypted because you're not really enforcing it with a policy.
Okay, I'll give you that, Eric.
All right. Let's see. We have another one. It says they are somebody who's experienced with the last 5 years in middleware applications, but they don't really have programming experience. What they want to know is how DevOps will help, and will it be required to learn coding for Amazon for the DevOps? I assume they're asking, will they need to know how to code for the DevOps Learning Path certification? So we've got 2 portions here. One is regarding the DevOps certification, and one is regarding DevOps helping in general. For I'm going to answer the DevOps portion. DevOps is always good if you have an environment where you have a lot of silos, where you have developers kind of working in isolation, and they hand off their stuff to an operations team. And so DevOps will help you bring those teams together. More than that, DevOps is becoming a set of kind of best practices without defining it as best practices. We have mechanisms such as infrastructure, as code, and stuff like that, that will help you to better deploy software faster with less downtime. And so if you're familiar with development, learning kind of these new DevOps tools will certainly help, because it will allow you to kind of write the code that some of these require. And now I'm going to pose this to one of the other members of the team here and see what do you guys think? Coding, is it required for the DevOps Amazon certification? Should they know how to at least program in one language?
Yeah, AWS says so, but the truth is they won't ask you questions about coding because maybe you are an specialist in Java and you don't know a single thing in Python, and that wouldn't be nice. You would have to like select the language. So they don't do that. They don't do this for the certification, but would be a bit of a shame having the certification and not having at least some minimal coding experience, because would be difficult to be a DevOps without really know how to code. I don't know. I don't believe actually that you need to be a specialist in coding, depending on your position related to DevOps. But you for sure you have to learn at least how to understand code and write some simple code in whatever language you might be familiar.
Nice. Along the same lines in the kind of DevOps arena, somebody's asking, are there case studies regarding best practices in DevOps? The answer is kind of yes and no. There are some really good write-ups that talk about really optimal ways for companies to structure their DevOps pipeline, but it's going to be specific to them. Etsy has some really good stuff. If you check out codeascraft.com, they have really good blog articles. They have really good slideshows where they talk about their process of going from kind of the old school legacy way of deploying apps that required downtime of several hours and had a lot of issues with rollbacks and database maintenance to they're somewhere in the ballpark of 50-ish deployments per day. So Etsy pushes code live 50 times a day, which is awesome, and Amazon does it like, I don't know, once every couple of seconds across all of their products. So every company has to find that right balance for them. Check out the AWS blog, which will have some good DevOps stuff. Netflix also publishes a lot of really good DevOps style information. Again, some of these guys don't call it DevOps because of the way they organically grew into these solutions, but they really are DevOps practices as we see them as a technical community. So check out Netflix blog, Etsy's blog, Amazon's blog, and I'll see if I can't compile a list of some of the others and maybe throw it up on a forum post. I'm just going to write myself a note. In the meantime, while I write this note, I want to get you guys answering a question. So we have a question here. Do I need Linux experience and knowledge to start learning the SysOps solution architect? I'm assuming that's SysOps or solution architect. So are those ones where we're relying really heavily on OS level specific knowledge, guys?
Yeah, I think, look, it does help, obviously. But the good thing is you can use Windows as well. So Linux is probably the most popular platform. There's more AMIs or Amazon Machine Images for Linux than there are for Windows, arguably. But you don't have to be a Linux expert to be an AWS expert. It is just one tool that you can use. So if you're looking at aiming to do one of those exams, then for the Solution Architect Associate, having an understanding of what the Linux platform can do in AWS, or the ways that you can implement Linux solutions in AWS, would be an advantage. As Eric mentioned earlier, it's unlikely that you'll get questions about specific Linux commands or command line commands in the exam. That's not what they're trying to do. They're not trying to prove that you're an expert in any particular topic. They're looking for evidence that you're able to use these services together to create the best outcome. So I think you could get by. And if I look at that Forbes survey, I've got it on my screen right now, and you're welcome to search for this. It's in the public domain. It's on Forbes.com, Forbes.com, C-O-M. And if you search for the 15 top-paying certifications for 2016, the three key takeaways that they outline here is that first, the most valuable IT certification skills involve creating apps on AWS and managing costs. So the AWS Certified Solutions Architects certification is required to show expertise in AWS cost analysis, demonstrating the ability to orchestrate AWS and advanced cost management and control features. So I didn't see the word Linux in there anywhere. This is all about how to use these services together. The second key outtake is that 6 of the 15 certifications are focused on security, making security an area of most in demand for IT in 2016. And the third key outtake was that the average income across the top 15 IT certifications is around 110K, which is pretty damn good. So I think that you know, work towards a solutions architect associate. Don't be too put off by not being a Linux expert. We've got some great courses on how to use the command line and understand more about Linux. Remember that you can use your Windows Amazon machine images, and you can run Windows environments no problem at all. And you know, a large user community use Windows on AWS. It's certainly not something that is considered to be a disadvantage. You can also run SQL Server. You know, you can do a lot of the things that you're used to doing in a Windows environment in AWS. And if you are looking at doing a more developer-focused track, then the Certified Developer Associate may be a better choice for you.
Nice. Along those same lines, somebody else was asking, they're a Windows administrator and they have experience working on AWS, but they see a lot of the tutorials, a lot of the information out there. People are using Linux, so they're just wondering, again, what's required, which I think you covered. It's not really about the OS. I think that a lot of the guys that do a lot of Amazon stuff gravitate towards Linux because they have familiarity with it because it's open source. So if you're a Windows guy, you can still gain all these same certifications. Yes, some of the tutorials, admittedly, are using Linux, but if you know what you're doing on the Windows side, you could swap out Windows OS for most of that stuff, I suspect.
Yeah.
I totally agree with you, Ben and Andrew, especially for the solutions architect. There's a couple of command line entries that they talk about, but you can install the AWS CLI on Windows and Linux. So it's the same commands that you'd be running regardless of your kind of operating system. It's only very high level. There's probably only a couple of questions at max regarding the AWS command line interface, and the majority of it is to do with kind of where things are on the console and how the infrastructure is kind of put together and pieced together and how the services talk to each other. So I wouldn't get too kind of het up on not knowing Linux for the solutions architect, and I'd just kind of focus on learning about the services, because I don't think you'll be tripped up at all there.
Nice. Yeah, I agree. That's a great way to phrase it. We have a question here that this looks like it's going to be an in-depth question. So I'm going to read this off and then I'll pose it to you guys and see who has some thoughts, because I think we'll all have a little bit to say about it. The question is, can you give advice about architecture including AWS ELB with EC2 auto-scaling and secure web sockets? One issue is with session stickiness. So session affinity is a problem. Using TCP, what else? Another scenario they can think of is establishing a direct connection with the instance, but they're left having the certificate on EC2. So I'm assuming they're talking about terminating the SSL at the EC2 level versus the load balancer, adding a DNS entry for that elastic IP, and having issues with traditional auto-scaling. So there's a lot to this, and I kind of read it in a fragmented way, but let's break it up. Let's talk about architecture regarding ELB, EC2 for auto-scaling for stuff with WebSockets. Who has some thoughts on this?
I have a lot, but I think that I already said too much. So if you want to reply, I can shut up.
Now let's go for it. It's a good one. So first off, it does support SSL termination and pass-through, which is a benefit. If you are terminating on the ELB, then you're going to be running your certificate through AWS. Can you just read through the question again, Ben? What was the actual TCP socket question?
Yeah, so let's see. Well, so let's talk about this one. Session affinity. We're talking about sticky sessions with ELB. I'll just say my thoughts are that if I can avoid sticky sessions, I do, always, because that means I probably am using some legacy software that doesn't play well with modern web architecture. We all run into those examples where we have to use those kind of old school systems that maybe they don't have centralized session state. So if you have to, you can use it. I prefer not to when possible. What do you guys think about sticky sessions, specifically for the ELB?
Yeah, one architecture best practice surrounding sticky sessions is never use it, as you said. This is actually a question. This is actually an architecture pattern that is very useful for certification. So I will put some thoughts on that. Regarding first the secure web sockets, ELB does a great job on that. So I think the easiest way is to put your SSL certificate in your ELB, because ELB, only if you're changing regions or if you do a really, really ugly mistake, you won't need to delete your ELB. So this is a great place to store your certificates, to encrypt your connection. And you can make the choice of either end the encryption in there and send unencrypted data to your instances, which will increase the performance. But if you are working in a very paranoid company and they really, really want to have encryption all the way over, you can also do that, but that would require a little bit more of work and would decrease the performance on the instance level a little bit. Talking about sticky sessions, one of the AWS best practices surrounding that is to store your session information on either DynamoDB or Elastic Cache. And this is actually a very good topic for certification. I know that sometimes you really can't. You are using a legacy software and you don't have any option to really customize that or change that. So in this case, you have to take the approach that would be using Elastic IP on a single instance. I really believe that it would be the best approach. Would be ugly, but the best. And you would have to do the auto-scaling, you do the disaster recovery by yourself, create some scripts or something like that. But we're talking about the session here, so I would store my sessions on Elastic Cache or DynamoDB.
Yeah, I think for most, even some of the old legacy stuff now, like old school old school ASP, .NET web forms, you can run that stuff with Elastic Cache and stuff like that. So even some of the older stuff, you'll be able to get up and running with that. So we are running low on time, but there are still a few good questions I want to kind of go through. So I'm going to pose this to each of you, Andrew, Stuart, and Eric. And what I'm looking for is a time window. So I'm going to ask a question. I want you guys just to shoot back a time window for each of these. This question is based on a few people asking about how long it takes to prepare for the AWS certs. Now, I know this is subjective, but let's say starting with the Solutions Architect Associate. Eric, what do you think?
I won't really say a time. I will say my experience. I was studying around 5 hours a day, and it took me 3 months to take the Solutions Architect, and took me a month after that to take the developer cert, and it took me a year to take the SysOps cert, studying 5 hours a day.
So that's some good real world. Stuart, what are your thoughts on this? For something like, you could pick any one, just make sure you say which one you're talking about, and then what's the time frame for that?
Yeah, I was going to say the solutions architect, because a lot of people are kind of looking at that one from the questions we've got coming up here. I think the kind of blueprint and the recommendations from AWS kind of say you should have a year's knowledge of full hands-on. Personally, I don't think that's kind of necessary. As Eric proved, he'd done it in 3 months. If you're completely new, I'd say get yourself an account. You can get a free account for a year and use a lot of the services for free. So get some hands-on knowledge, fire up a couple of instances, have a look around, get familiar with the services, and create a VPC, set up a couple of networks, and just really start to play around. Having the hands-on is really useful. There's also a lot of videos from AWS from the reInvent that Andrew mentioned earlier. They got some great topics on there, and obviously the courses and learning paths that we offer here at Cloud Academy. With that information at hand, I would say between, depending on how many hours you put in a day, but between 3 to 6 months, I think you'll be able to get the solutions architect, certainly.
Nice. That's great. Andrew, you agree with Eric and Stuart so far on roughly 3 to 6 months, depending on the level of effort?
Yeah, I mean, everybody learns differently, but set yourself a challenge. Let's get you there in 3 months. That's why we're here. So sign up for the foundations courses, and let's get you to that point.
Nice. I like it. We have a few questions. Again, we're running low on time, but there's some really good questions that I really want to pick off before we wrap up. This one's regarding, several people asked, the best certification for the current job market. We talked about it a few times, and my thoughts would be the Solutions Architect Associate. What do you guys think?
Okay, I've just shared the Forbes link, which I think is quite a good benchmark for that type of question. So what Forbes.com have done is just survey a number of people and basically list all of the certifications that are available in the market today and give a top 15, if you like, for 2016, they've called it. So I think that link's going to be shared. It's in the public domain, as I said, if you search for it. Top paying IT certifications in 2016, and look on the Forbes.com website, you should find it there. It lists Amazon Web Services Certified Solution Architect as the top certification to have in the market for 2016. The second one it lists is Certified in Risk and Information Systems Control, or CRISC. Certified Information Security Manager is next, and Certified Information Systems Security Professional is fourth after that. And then it lists number 5, Project Management Professional. So it's literally saying that the AWS Certified Solution Architect Associate certification is higher on the list than Project Management Professional, which is anyone in the market will know is a very popular project management certification. So I think you'd be in good company to go ahead with the Certified Solution Architect Associate track.
Nice. Here's a question that I like this question. The topic is DevOps. They want to know about the general roles and responsibilities in addition to the employer expectations from a DevOps cloud engineer. I'll say my piece, and then I'd be curious to hear from you guys what you think. For me, I think the general roles and responsibilities depend on the company. It could be that you're predominantly doing development with maybe some operations, helping get these systems that you actually develop deployed. So you develop it, you deploy it. That's a pretty common model that we're seeing emerge. Another one would just be like an automation engineer. This is becoming popular. It's kind of like supplementing an ops team. You see at Google with site reliability engineers. These are guys that basically, if you were to take DevOps and turn it into a job title, it would probably be called site reliability engineer. It's where they work with the dev team, they work with the ops team, and their job is just to keep systems up and running. And the common comparison is they're building a rocket ship as it's in flight, because these systems have to stay up and running, but you also have to be able to apply patches and keep these things secure. So employer expectations. For a DevOps engineer, I'd expect them to be able to at least do some scripting. I'd want to see that they could program in at least one language really proficiently, if not a few at a kind of middle level. I'd expect them to be able to understand how things are operated, how their code actually is deployed, how it actually is going to perform in production, and they should know about monitoring, high availability, and these sort of things. What do you guys think, if you were to take DevOps and turn it into a job title, what would the expectations be? I hear crickets, so...
Oh, yeah, sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah, it's such a...
Maybe nobody likes it.
Look, I'll just give us another opinion here, because, you know, for us and for sysops engineers, DevOps is the #1 topic of conversation. You know, it's like it's an evolving landscape, and there's so many good ideas out there about how we can do things better, which is really exciting. I think from the sort of business top-down view, you know, again, we've been through this a few iterations, haven't we? We've done, you know, like a lot of changes in the IT environment over the years, and a lot of the times I think business managers get quite nervous when people start talking about doing things differently, because suddenly they think, am I still going to get something at the end of this, and can I report on it, and is it going to make our business successful? So I wouldn't worry too much about the DevOps tag, and it does apply to such a broad range of doing things. My perspective on it is that DevOps has just become the new normal. That's just the way that people do things in a more efficient way today. And that is one of the key benefits of cloud services, is that you literally can spin up things much faster. You can do things with a lot more scale, and you know, you're generally only paying for services that you use. So if you do get it wrong at the start, it's something that can be changed quickly, and you can iterate and fail fast, basically. So that whole approach, or that whole philosophy, if you like, is inherent to how cloud solutions can be put or work. I don't think you'd have to worry too much about people saying, I want a DevOps engineer. You know, you must be a DevOps professional. But one thing that you can use as a good trading card is just having those certifications, because the AWS certifications is that one common denominator we have amongst all of this you know, changing environment. It's the one thing that says to employers and customers that, you know, you're able to do this in the most proficient way. But please don't get too hung up on the term DevOps. I think it's more of, as I think Ben says, it's more of a philosophy than anything else. Is that right, Ben?
Yeah, I like to say when DevOps is done right, you don't hear the word DevOps.
You don't hear the word DevOps, yeah.
Yeah, because it's a philosophy. It's not an actual job title. Now, maybe that's going to change over the coming months, where it gets tacked on more and more to job titles. But really, things like site reliability engineer or a developer who has that experience actually running their own code in production, that's the embodiment of a DevOps engineer. So I just want to throw this back to the team. We have a few more really good questions. If you have the time, I'll stay on and keep throwing them to you, but I want to take into consideration the students here are also spending probably their lunch breaks, etc. So I'm going to ask you guys watching. Do you guys want to stick around and have us answer a few more questions, or should we wrap this thing up? All right, I'm seeing a couple more questions. Stuart's got to leave in about 5 to 10 minutes, so let's take another 5 to 10 minutes just to answer a few more questions. And if we can't get to some of the questions, we'll try and get them answered on the forum at some point. So let's see what we have. Okay, I've started my prep work on the AWS Solutions Architect Associate and Professional exam. How good is it to know DevOps concepts and tools? So what do you guys think for taking these exams, knowing these concepts about deployment and configuration management, infrastructure as code, What are your thoughts on that, helping people understand the solutions architect and associate and professional?
I think for the SA associate, having an understanding of the tools that you could use, not specifically how to use them, but knowing that you could use Code Deploy, which is based on Chef, what CloudFormation can do for you, what Elastic Beanstalk is. The Elastic Beanstalk allows you to launch and manage applications very successfully, and having a good understanding or adequate understanding of what the different use cases might be for those services, what code commit is. There's a raft of services available in AWS, which can make it quite challenging if you're coming to this for the first time, because there's a lot of things to know. But I think having a good working understanding of what the use cases are for those application and environment management services would be a good start.
Nice. I'm going to throw off one more question here that I think is a really good one. It's regarding Linux. So for the guys who really specialize in working on Linux, what kind of certifications would we prefer? I like the LPI, but what do you guys think? Are there Linux-specific certifications that you really like? Okay, I'm hearing crickets again.
Yeah, sorry, I'm here. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so Linux certifications, I think just going back to what we were talking about earlier, I mean, it's not so much about the OS. The OS is just one way of doing things, and look at containers, look at Docker, look at how much interest there is in Lambda and serverless computing today. And if you were to look through Lambda, you might think, well, what are we doing here? Okay, we're actually giving customers the ability to just call code functions without having to care about what the OS is and how it's actually managed. That will all be provisioned by AWS for me, which from a business perspective is really interesting, because suddenly you don't have to worry about all of that complex wire fiddling that we love. But suddenly there's a service that you can use that allows you to just do a code function and be billed for the time and memory that's used. So I think that that if you wanted a sort of very holistic view, would be my take on where the market's going, is that people love that commodity service. They love the fact that things can be done for them and managed in the best way, managed for them. And the managed services of AWS, S3, EC2 to a certain extent, of course, it still requires a lot of input from the end users to manage that. Simple queue service and Lambda are fully managed services that actually take away a lot of the undifferentiated heavy lifting that's involved with computing today. So I wouldn't worry too much about the Linux side of it. You'll find the commands that you use on a Linux platform through the AWS command line interface are going to be the same as the ones you might use through PowerShell. There'll be some nuances, but ultimately, you're able to do the things you need to without being a Linux expert. But however, don't get too stuck on that one area. I think that you're better off thinking about how you can use these services together and to recognize and explain what is the best way of bringing the services together to create the best outcome.
Nice. I'm going to ask one more question, and then we'll wrap up for the day. The question is regarding how to prep his resume for DevOps positions. So these are going to be positions most likely where they're doing kind of site reliability, engineering stuff, or development where they also host their own code. So I'll take a crack at it. This is a space I've worked in and really enjoy. For me, it was gaining as much experience with a few sets of tools, stuff like Ansible, Chef, Puppet, and SaltStack. I went out and tried to understand these things really as best I could and how they fit into the landscape, and actually practice deploying stuff with them and seeing if I can deploy stuff without causing any sort of downtime. Understanding those tools will help start conversations with potential employers. People are wanting to use things like Ansible and Chef in their deployment and in their configuration management. Containers is another hot topic that in the DevOps scope, people like seeing that you at least have familiarity with it. It doesn't mean you have to be an expert, but if you can talk about actually spooling up a Docker container and maybe getting it deployed into something like Google Container Engine, I think that's gonna go a long way towards opening some dialogue there. And monitoring is another one. If you have an understanding of the different scopes of monitoring, because you're going to be monitoring at different levels of the technology stack. You start with the operating system and your code running on it, and your platform holistically. So understanding how these things are all running and knowing what tools really work well for that is going to go a long way. So as you're doing this prep for working through your resume, start with these automation tools. Another one, Jenkins. Now you could pick any CI/CD server. I like Jenkins, but pick one, kind of understand its concepts, really practice deploying a few things with it to different cloud providers. That's going to help you have conversations about deployment and about automating that deployment with these companies. But before we wrap up, anyone else have any thoughts on preparing a resume that's kind of DevOps focused?
Yeah. I have a few. DevOps is very new, so I remember we talking about DevOps a few months ago, and someone said, "Oh, nobody knows about DevOps, and everybody wants to know about it." So I think that get visibility is also important. So try to open your own blog. Don't worry about being famous and so on, but try to share your knowledge. If you're writing to your own, you can write a tutorial related to DevOps for your own, so you can later on, oh, I need to redo that thing. You have a tutorial for your own. That's a benefit. But also when people are looking at your profile, looking at your LinkedIn profile and see those publications, since it's so new, for people that are looking to your profile, that will look as a DevOps engineer, that will look like you know what you're saying. And I hope that you know what you're saying. So blogs is also a powerful tool, and the right keywords, the right services, as you mentioned, Ben, knowing automation tool, knowing at least one I would say cool programming language, knowing Ruby, knowing Python, that will also add a few points.
Yeah, I agree. Go is becoming incredibly popular among the Docker community, so something like that is worth knowing. Awesome. I'm gonna call it a wrap here. Thank you guys so much. This is always a lot of fun for me to get to hear the questions from you guys and getting kind of put on the spot to think of our years of experience and how we can define that to answer these questions. So I have a lot of fun with this. I'm guessing Andrew does, but again, it's very early in the morning. I don't even think poor Andrew's had his coffee. So
I probably need a coffee right now, but
okay.
Yeah, we really like having the opportunity to help you. And if there's any other forums that you think might be useful, remember we've got our support forum. We like tackling questions here. It gives us some almost FaceTime with you. So please keep letting us know what will work best for you. See you next time.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you guys so much, and I look forward to talking with you guys on the next one. Have a great day, guys.
Thank you.